shall come to order.
Okay, welcome everybody to the St Andrews Union Debating Society, the oldest and some might say finest of its kind.
Yeah.
There's quite a lot of you this evening, so we can definitely do better than that. We've got some amazing speakers, so we're going to do it again. Welcome to the St Andrews Union Debating Society, the oldest and some might say finest of its kind.
Yeah.
That's much better, thank you very much. Thank you for coming out and joining us this evening. With the motion that stands before the House reads, "This House opposes monogamy." We've got some excellent speakers. It's my pleasure to introduce on the proposition Claire Edwards and Dr. Bernice Kuang. And on the opposition, Bill Shackman and Susie Mountain. Now, before we begin tonight's debate, I would like to invite the Clerk of the House, Lewis, to read last week's minutes in the style of a man at a bar looking for a third.
Hey, me and my partner saw you from across the bar and we really dig your vibe.
Point. What type of woman do you take me for? Counterpoint. This is St Andrews. There are worse places to meet people.
There seems to be some disagreement in the House. We shall have to take a vote by oral acclamation. All those in favour of taking the minutes as read, say aye.
Aye.
All those against, nay?
Nay.
It seems rather close. I shall have to consult with my sergeant. Inez?
Aye.
Aye? The minutes are taken as read.
Aye.
Don't tempt me. Okay, so without further ado, I would like to invite the first speaker for the proposition to begin tonight's debate. Hear, hear.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for the invitation and the opportunity to speak on this topic. I have to make a confession though. I'm not actually that opposed to monogamy, even though I am proposing that the House opposes it. But what I do oppose is the idea of something which is not freely and mutually agreed. I need to tell you something of my perspective, which is as a counsellor, working with individuals and working with couples. And it's through that counselling lens that I want to talk about this issue this evening. So there's a couple of things. Is it a natural state of being? I lean much more towards the argument that it's a social construct and that it's an artifact of capitalist concepts of property and inheritance. Historically, there's no doubt about it, marriage itself was very much a transaction, and it's, does that mean something?
Just 1 minute, protected time.
Oh, right, sorry, yes. And that monogamy is as a method of control. The lord of the manor needed to know that his heirs were indeed his own children. But I supported the motion because, again, from the counselling perspective, I really believe there needs to be much more of a conversation about this, an exploration of it. And this evening is obviously part of that. At the societal level, and in terms of marriage and all intimate relating, what expectations do we cultivate? What constraints and limitations do we impose on people and why? I really want that to be looked at much more closely. And then at the level of relationships themselves, what do we really mean when we say to forsake all others? What if we don't actually say that, but we expect it? What will it look like and feel like in 5 years' time, in 10 years' time, down the line? From the counselling perspective again, all human relating is a form of contract, explicit or not. And I would argue it's the lack of explicitness that creates many of the painful problems that occur within relationships. Marriage in our society, which has obviously opened out much more beyond being that between a man and a woman, but it still appears to be understood to include this particular expectation of monogamy. But without a discussion, a conversation, a negotiation, marriage and other intimate relationships can be full of assumptions, unspoken expectations, misunderstandings, and potentially heartbreak. Intimate relating comes in many forms, and we really are seeing this more and more within the counselling room. So people in polyamorous arrangements, for instance, come to see us not because polyamory itself is a problem for them, but because actually relating with other human beings is challenging and complicated. But one of the interesting things about polyamorous relationships is an investment of a great deal of time and effort and energy in contracting and navigating, in clarifying and checking out. So coming to a shared understanding of what it is that they're actually engaging with. And these activities of contracting might not seem very sexy or romantic, but then neither is discovering, oh so painfully, that a presumption of monogamy in your relationship was in fact just an assumption. And actually, again, within the counselling room, though when we think of monogamy, we perhaps are thinking of physical, sexual relationships, many people come to us because of emotional affairs, which are as wounding, sometimes even more so, than somebody breaching the contract through having a sexual relationship with somebody else. Contracting is a really major part of counselling. It's about, as the counsellor, creating conditions of trust and warmth, an emotional environment which allows things to surface. Fears, concerns, questions, expectations, assumptions, fantasies and imaginings. And then to be curious and interested in them. What do they mean? Where do they come from? Are they your own, or are they born from social expectation and upbringing? And what life stage are you in? What matters to you now that might have mattered less or more when you were younger? And such conversations help us to much better understand what we want, why we want it, and what we can commit to. So I want to acknowledge that this is obviously really hard, and that we're not generally encouraged to explore things like this to this depth. And our models are usually our parents, and who themselves were not encouraged to question or explore these issues. And yet actually, human relating and being in relationship with another or others is like such an important part of being human, such an important part of being society and of being, a member of society. So a renowned couples therapist, Esther Perel, author of Mating in Captivity, which says quite a bit already, talks about being married to 3 men, but all of them are her husband of 40 years. Because we change, we mature, in theory at least, we develop. Having children, not having children changes us. Our health, the work we do, the wider family, the world that we live in, all of this has an impact on us. The person that we are in our 20s is sometimes not recognizable in the person that we become in our 60s. It's true for us and anyone for whom we are in relationship with. And in our most intimate relationships, this means that conversations have to be revisited time and time again. So, monogamy might well be a great choice for many of us, but as a societal expectation that is imposed, unexplored, unexamined, and blindly adhered to, I believe that we cannot support it. Thank you.
I'd like to thank Claire for that fine speech, and now invite the first speaker from the opposition, Bill Shackman. Hear, hear.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for inviting me to speak tonight. Thank you for those words, Claire, and interesting exploration of the assumptions and presumptions that we make when we talk about monogamy. I guess for my own confession, by way of introduction, I'd like to say that I've been in a monogamous relationship for the last 27 years. There have been ups and downs. It's not always been easy, but that loving relationship is the bedrock layer on which my identity and my family have been formed. I relate to the idea of having many marriages within one relationship. We have grown and changed over those 27 years. And in fact, one of the few things that remains a constant in my life and binds me to my history is my partner. And I'd be happy to explain to you what I find meaningful about the exclusive nature of that monogamous relationship. But I want to say from the outset that really that's just my personal choice. Monogamy works for me, but it does not work for everyone. I do not oppose polyamory. I do not oppose open marriage. I do not oppose bigamy, group marriage, polyandry, serial monogamy, or any consensual, loving relationship. The opposition to any form of love is simply intolerance. And if you as a house oppose monogamy, one of the many valid expressions of love, then you are voting for bigotry, another form of hatred. Now, it may sound pedantic, but I think it's actually a very important point. If your proposition said that this house opposes monogamy as the only valid form of love, as the only acceptable social contract, then I would have to agree. If by monogamy we mean a system of bigotry that opposes other valid expressions of love, by all means, oppose it. But this is not at all what I mean by monogamy. By monogamy, I simply mean an exclusive relationship between two consenting, loving partners, an agreement of sexual exclusivity and the primacy of that partner in all forms of loving intimacy. And I am a monogamist in this sense. If you oppose monogamy, then you oppose my lifestyle, my choices, and my love. And if you oppose my ability to freely choose to express my love in whichever way I see fit, then you are a bigot. And this question really gets to the heart of what pluralism is, the acceptance and cherishing of diversity. Everyone has the right to express their love in their own way. You should accept polyamory. You should accept homosexual love. You should accept bisexual love. You should accept trans love, straight love, queer love, kinky love. You should accept and cherish everybody. Oppose hatred, oppose injustice, oppose bigotry, but do not oppose monogamy. You really should not oppose any valid expression of love. Now that said, I think the question of why I am in favor of long-term fidelity in a loving relationship is secondary to that important point of not denying someone else's identity. But I think it's important to tell you what I appreciate about monogamy and why I am in favor of it, and why I find fidelity to be meaningful. First of all is the unique bond of trust that it fosters. I don't have to prove myself to my partner, and my partner does not have to prove themselves to me. We're there for each other no matter what. I'm not going to leave them because someone more exciting, more interesting, or more attractive comes along. And we're able to trust each other because we know that no one else shares that special bond. Now, other people might occupy other lacks in our relationship, right? I don't have other people I can talk to about, or I can't really talk to my partner about Valentinian Gnosticism or any of the other things that I find fascinating, right? So I turn to other people for those discussions. She doesn't play bluegrass music with me, so I turn to other people for that. but the only person who knows all of those separate pieces of my identity, and the only person who accepts the whole of me, is the same person that I share the most intimate parts of my life with. And I don't think I could be more vulnerable with anybody else. And that unique bond is a recognition of the unique particularity of each other. It's a validation of their authentic and whole self that I cannot or will not share with anyone else. The sexual bond that I share with my partner is a unique expression of the particularity of love. I love them and no one else in that way. And that level of trust and vulnerability required to achieve that level of intimacy is deepened by its exclusivity. Even just on a purely practical level, it takes a long time to find what really works, both sexually and emotionally. To find what really pleases you and your partner can take years, and indeed will change over the years. If we want to get really honest, my youthful attempts at open relationships or polyamory all ended in jealousy, squabbling, and a lack of any real open intimacy before we ever even really knew what would please each other. By developing an exclusive bond of trust with one person over the course of years, my partner and I were able to achieve a much more satisfying level of intimacy. And that fidelity to one partner not only strengthens my bond with them, but it also deepens my relationships with others as well. By removing the possibility of any romantic interest in my relationship with others, I have to explore different facets of those relationships. Emotional connection, spiritual bonding, intellectual engagement, musical intimacy are all deepened by taking away the romantic component, or even the possibility of a romantic component. I can be more open and intimate, more vulnerable with any of you in other ways because I am not open to you romantically. And if I'm being really honest, I think there actually is a sexual component in all human relationships, and even in our relationship to the divine. My studies in Jewish mysticism and Freud back this up. But perhaps this isn't the place to explore that quite fully. But for our purposes, I'll just say that by denying myself the ability to act on those impulses, I have to channel that energy into more enriching bonds of connection. My friendships are deeper and more complex because I know that they will never be anything other than friendships. And in that sense, monogamy, my sexual fidelity to one person, helps me to grow and develop as a human being. And like I said before, monogamy works for me. It enriches my life, but it does not work for everyone. So please do not oppose my lifestyle just because you have some problems with it. Monogamy is difficult, it is problematic, and I'll admit that it has its problems. We should oppose a system of oppression, not oppose monogamy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to Bill for that fine speech. Of all the things that I thought you were going to say this evening, kinky love was not one of them. I'd now like to invite our next speaker of the House, Dr. Bernice Kuang, to continue the debate for side proposition. Hear, hear!
So in this debate, the the resolution is opposed to monogamy, and the assignment was monogamy is focusing specifically on the idea of marrying once and therefore having one single long-term partner. So first, I'm going to tell you a little history about marriage overall and how it's changed over time from having very practical functions to now existing as more of a social and emotional symbol. So once you see that the purpose and role of marriage has shifted, you'll see that it's no longer an institution that matches the notion of one single partner, and it's no longer fit for purpose. Following this, I'll talk about how all the supposed benefits of marriage and having one partner are actually artifactual. A lot of social science research shows that these benefits are really selection into marriage and not some magical positive effect that marriage has on families and couples and children. I also want to acknowledge that marriage is really diverse in its forms. So tonight, I'm only going to talk about Western ideas of marriage and partnerships, because otherwise, I don't know what I'm talking about. So marriage has a long history. However, its shape has changed drastically over centuries, and today's Western notions of marriage bear little resemblance to marriage even 50 or 60 years ago. So historically, marriage was about family alliances and the consolidation of power among the elite. So for the wealthy proportion of the population, it was about keeping the insiders in and the outsiders out, which is why the church had so much to say about who was allowed to marry who, how the ceremony has to be, and then if you want to break up, you got to go back to them to get divorced. It was so that powerful families wouldn't get too powerful and then compete with the church for power. But then for the average person, marriage was to make having sex and giving birth to children respectable, and to mutually provide economic and social support. Marriage and childbearing, in that order, was a mode for living and working that was prescribed and couldn't be altered without stigmatization. It was essential to marry because joint family work was the only acceptable way to get economic and material solvency. So surviving is a lot of work, and it's easier as a group activity. But then over time, something happened. Love conquered marriage, and marriage became a completely different beast. So how did this happen? First, with industrialization, the concept of the family as an economic unit weakened, and more people got the option to work as individuals for a wage. First wave feminism, second wave feminism started to kind of recognize women as like independent adult human beings, and instead of just like the childlike dependence of their menfolk, a concept I suppose that's still lost on Americans. So women started participating in higher education and joining the labor force, which also seemed to make the social and economic role of marriage more pointless. And then with the invention of modern contraception and the sexual revolution that followed and increased sexual freedom, well, that made it so that you could have sex without the risk of unintended pregnancy. And then the marriages that would have had to happen if you became pregnant accidentally, well, those became less important too. So then with these changes came the rise of individual desires over social expectations and commitment. And marriage shifted to become a more individualized program that people can enter in and remain in and then leave based on personal preference. So sociologists Beck and Beck Gernsheim, ironically a husband and wife duo, argued that when marriage became a personal choice, the common interest of modern married partners became romantic love and emotional fulfillment, instead of economic necessity, moral, legal, or religious obligation. And as a result, marital bonds are more fragile because they now rest on an emotional foundation. Beck and Beck Gernsheim further said that increased personal choice also means more risk. So marital love is riskier, it entails more personal responsibility. You're not necessarily marrying someone that's been vetted by your community and your family. You're going out on a limb and following your gut and making a gut choice. And we all know your guts have not great brains, right? So I'm gonna use some French, but no, not great brains. Your guts are not that smart sometimes. And it's personal choice, so also personal risk and personal responsibility. If it goes wrong, it's because it's your fault, not because the institution is not very user-friendly. Sociologist Anthony Giddens also said that individualism changed marriage by making it about pure relationships. So pure relationships exist solely for the sake of the relationship. So they last only as long as people are romantically fulfilled, since personal fulfillment is the point of the relationship. Pure relationships are not held together by tradition or obligation or a sense of long-term commitment. So Giddens extends this by saying, okay, if you really want a pure relationship, then non-marital cohabitation or serial partnering is the way to go. So, love conquered marriage, completely took its legs out. These are the legs that gave marriage its oomph, its authority, its purpose. And now marriage is meant to be about love and feelings, and what could be more chaotic and changeable than passionate romantic love? And furthermore, what could be more unwise to pin your entire livelihood and practical day-to-day functioning to? George Bernard Shaw described marriage as an institution that brings two people under the influence of the most violent, most insane, most delusive, and most transient of passions. And then they're required to swear that they'll remain in that excited, abnormal, exhausting state continuously until death do them part. It's entirely unrealistic in the age of pure relationships to rely on one person for excitement and emotional fulfillment across an entire life course. Passion and romance thrive in a context of novelty and excitement, which is the exact opposite of marital longevity. So that's why when marriage is not doing so well, people say you should go on vacation, because vacation brings novelty, right? And novelty and excitement is just, it brings novelty and excitement to something that is inherently unexciting. And that very thing makes modern marriage work, so the very thing that makes modern marriage work is day-to-day reliability, steadfastness, showing up to do the work. That's what kills excitement and novelty. So marriage, as we expect it to be, sets people up for failure. More than that, the assumption of marriage being long-lasting and like a lifelong thing, and also romantically excitement, can create population-level economic vulnerability. Married couples make practical, interconnected economic decisions, assuming long-term relationship stability, and women are almost always at the short end of the stick when breakups happen. This is because research robustly shows that men get a pay bump when they get married, and women experience the opposite. Women also are much more likely to take frequent career breaks and for their husbands and children, and this puts them at a deficit that they never recover over a lifetime. Another huge takeaway from today that you should all remember for your next cocktail party is that all the benefits you hear about marriage are really about social selection into marriage. It's not random who gets married and who has one partner versus multiple partners over a life course in today's world. Wealthier, highly educated people are much more likely to marry than disadvantaged people, and they're much more likely to have fewer partners over the life course. Their lives are just more stable. This makes it look like marriage has this magical effect and confers all these benefits on couples and relationships and children, when the reality is that it's only the highest quality relationships that have the benefit of financial stability that even get converted into marriage in the first place. So if you made couples from disadvantaged backgrounds get married, they wouldn't suddenly gain all the supposed benefits of marriage. That's because those benefits aren't the result of getting married itself. They're the result of being richer in the first place and rich enough to marry. So I'm not saying that historically all marriages had no love or affection, and that today's marriages have no pragmatic considerations. I am saying that we as a society expect marriage, what we as a society expect marriage to be, what we envision the purpose of, it's vastly changed. And it's dysfunctional for us to imagine that it can be one thing when it also has to function as many other things at the same time. So we are expecting and idealizing marriage to be a pageant queen and then also putting her to work like a workhorse. For many people, the reality is that marriage to one partner in the long term ends up being about involuntary economic codependence and does serve a lot of practical functions for survival. But married people are let down when they feel like they're not in a pure relationship or say, oh, we're only married because of the kids and we can't afford to break up. You could also argue that even with all the ways marriage to one long-term partner is difficult, a lot of people stay married for their entire lives. That's true, that doesn't mean it's the optimal way to live. You can drive with your feet, that doesn't mean it's optimal. Long-term marriages actually defy the odds stacked against them. So can we be more radical and come up with another way to have love and passion, separate from the way that we also make sure the house gets cleaned and the rent gets paid? Is your best chance for passion and romance really going to be with the same person you have to negotiate cleaning the toilet with? Shouldn't we oppose something that no longer makes sense?
Okay, I'd like to thank Bernice for that fine speech, and now cross the table and give the debate to Susie Mountain to continue the debate for opposition. Hear, hear.
Thank you very much, and thank you as well for inviting me. I suggested to Bill that he should go first. I'm now regretting that. I'm not going to talk about kinky love, and there have been quite a few hard acts to follow, so apologies in advance. However, I do think that accusing everybody of being bigots if they vote against us was a really good move, so thank you. So I'm a family lawyer, and as such I have had the honour of witnessing from a close and considered vantage point the immense complexities of human relationships, the fragility of human emotions, and the resilient yet delicate structures upon which families are built. Monogamy, whilst not immune to its critics or occasional failings, is a cornerstone of relational, emotional, and societal stability. Today I stand before you not only to argue in favour of its continued relevance, but to remind us all that, although perhaps not for everybody, monogamy remains one of the most vital social contracts upon which individuals, families, and communities thrive. And as Phil has touched upon already, monogamy satisfies one of the most fundamental human needs, emotional security. So to understand the significance of this, one must first appreciate the foundational principle that relationships, particularly long-term committed ones, are predicated on trust, predictability, and mutual dependence. And in the monogamous relationship model, these elements are given the space to flourish. Monogamy allows individuals to invest deeply in one another without the omnipresent fear of displacement or abandonment by a rotating cast of other romantic or sexual partners. It is a model that facilitates profound emotional connection, intimacy, and an abiding sense of trust, all of which are essential for enduring and stable relationships. The exclusivity inherent in monogamy is not a limitation of choice, as some might suggest, but rather a deepening of commitment, a decision to say, I choose you and only you, again and again, at every life stage. The fact that monogamy can be broken, and as I say, I'm a family lawyer, I know that it very often can be broken, is not a good reason to oppose it. It's still something that many people aspire to. It is still a model that works for a very large number of people. And in fact, the people who are breaking monogamous relationships are in fact not being monogamous. So it is not a good reason, that's not a good argument. The second reason that I oppose this motion is that monogamy can provide family stability and can play a key role in the development of children. And I speak to that not only as a family lawyer, but also as a parent. Now, I'm a divorce lawyer, I'm a divorced divorce lawyer, and in fact I'm a divorced divorce lawyer with 3 children. I know better than anybody that it would be hugely more practical, easier for my life, easier for my children, if I was in a monogamous, committed relationship. From a practical point of view, in terms of time resources, financially, everything would be easier. It is a very, very practical thing for there to be 2 parents in a household. Now, that is absolutely not to say that my children are crying every night and nobody's getting fed. I think everybody's absolutely fine and in fact flourishing, and many people do a great job as a single parent, many people do a great job in all kinds of family models, but there are certain practical advantages to children that are growing up within a unit where there are 2 monogamous parents. And I think it can be a very healthy model. It can work extremely well for a very large number of children in our society. Monogamous relationships also foster cooperation between parents, and parents can model values that their children might want to go on to see in their own relationships, and that modelling is extremely important. I know that in my life I would be very careful not to introduce somebody into it where we would demonstrate the kind of relationships that I wouldn't want my children to go on to have themselves. You want them to see security and stability, and the kind of relationship that Bill describes, where he describes the relationship as being the absolute bedrock, the foundation of his life, that's something that I think we all aspire to. When I see my clients come through the other side of a divorce, they aren't saying, that was horrible. In fact, actually, that's not true. A number of them do say, that was horrible, I'm never getting married again. And lo and behold, they come back a couple of years later, I'd like a prenup for my next marriage. They aren't saying, I'm now planning to get married so that I can come back and see you again in a few years' time and pay you another nice big sum of money, which is great for me, not so great for them. Because nobody's going into this wanting it to break down. People go back into marriages because they do want that commitment. They're opting into it. We're not talking about an outdated version of marriage where people feel compelled to do it that is imposed upon them. But in a marriage freely entered into, people aspire to remain in that relationship, and for very good reason. They want that stability, they want that exclusivity. And that really is something that many people, myself included, would aspire to. Monogamy also serves a critical role in ensuring societal cohesion. I really can't say that word, I'm going to stop saying societal in a minute. But it can promote equality and reduce social conflict. A society that embraces monogamy amongst other forms of relationship, but it is one in which individuals are more likely to enter relationships based on love, mutual compatibility and equality, rather than status or competition. Bill has said quite a few things that I was planning to say, so I'm just cutting out those parts. And the other thing that must be acknowledged, that probably has been touched upon already, are the cultural and ethical dimensions of monogamy. So for many individuals and communities around the world, monogamy is not merely a personal preference, but it's a deeply held value that reflects cultural, religious and ethical principles. So to oppose monogamy, and this was really Bill's point that I would like to build on, but to actively oppose it is to disregard the importance of these traditions and the moral frameworks that have sustained people for centuries, and that people hold these values really closely. It's extremely important to them. And whilst it may not be for everybody, for countless individuals in our society, that is still something that they want in their lives, still something that works extremely well for many. So in conclusion, any motion that opposes monogamy is not only flawed, but it's also deeply misguided. It can provide emotional security, it can foster family stability, it can benefit children, and it can promote cohesion. Don't take away Bill's relationship model.
Okay, I'd like to thank Susie for that fine speech, and to all of our speakers for what has so far been a great debate this evening. Now it's time to hear from you. We open up the debate to the floor. I can see a few new faces this evening, so I'm going to reiterate how this works. So in order to make what we call a floor speech, please raise your hand to catch the eye of the chair, and if you're called upon, please stand if you're able and give your name for the minutes. You have up to 2 minutes to speak. You do not have to fill that time. If you go over 2 minutes, you'll get gavelled, as Bill was earlier. So you can stand up, you can share your thoughts, you can propose a question to any of our speakers. Basically, we want to hear from you in this time. We've got about 20 minutes, so we can get a good few floor speeches in. We also do a prize for the best floor speech, so you get our teeny tiny plastic trophy. But you also get, this week, it's a £15 voucher for Rectors, which is the cafe that's in the Student Union. So without further ado, any speeches from the floor? Yep, let's go at the back here. Please stand and state your name for the minutes.
Sorry. In order to besmirch marriage, the proposition quoted George Bernard Shaw, who described marriage as, quote, a pact to swear that they will remain in that excited, abnormal and exhausting condition continuously until death do them part. Does the Honourable Speaker realise she's inadvertently made marriage sound extremely fun?
Okay, thank you very much. Any other speeches from the floor? Yeah, let's go just here. Please stand and state your name.
Alright. My question is also for the proposition. I agree that love is quite an unstable thing to base a major life decision on, because it is inherently an emotion, it's inherently changeable. But perhaps the solution to this is not to get rid of the institution, but to reform the way we think about the institution, to bring in perhaps more, not just practical concerns, but to think when you're entering into a marriage, are we compatible in terms of what our future prospects are? Are we good friends? Do we have shared values? Do we, have economic statuses which will work with one another. And it's perhaps not the most pretty thing, but if you approach it from that angle, then marriage becomes a lot more of a stable institution and an institution which can work. And the first speaker talked about contractual relationships. Why not have a contract for marriage? Sit down and write down a contract that says, here's these things which are non-negotiable in a marriage, these are things that I want from this marriage, and you both sign it, and it doesn't have to be like legal, like I'm not saying like you could take them to court, but you know, if you have a contract and then you have the contract and you can go, if they break that, you quote the contract and you say, look, you promised to do this thing when we got married, right? And you didn't do it, and then that's a more firm basis. When you go into a marriage, you've made all these conscious decisions, so you're not sitting there thinking, well, in 10 years if they decide they don't love me anymore, then I'm screwed, you know? So maybe it's not monogamy marriage that's the problem, it's the way that our society is approaching it right now that needs to change.
Other speakers from more? Yes, just here, please stand and state your name for the minutes.
Both sides had a similar sort of focus that I would like to see addressed. On the proposition, there was a heavy emphasis on marriage as an institution potentially being negative, and on the opposite proposition, opponent side, they were talking heavily on things like stability. But I offer a suggestion that marriage can exist and be polygamous. There is no need for these things these things can coexist. There can be a stable family unit which has polyamory, and that unit could involve the institution of marriage between maybe a core couple, or like you get two couples in the same house.
Good marriage.
Okay, thank you to Joe. Other speeches from the floor? Yes, at the back here, please stand and state your name for the minutes.
I wanted to offer, I want to discuss, you made a very good point, I wanted to offer the thought of how beneficial is monogamy to women, exactly, because married men live longer, married women tend to live less so. And as you saw, if we were as a society to explore polygamy in terms of health for women and just as a future, I want that discussion essentially, because I think monogamy suits far better men, and they kind of created this system because, you know, this is my heir, this is my child, this is a way to control women. Then I want to explore kind of, the idea of exploration of polygamy as a form of freedom for women.
Floor. Yep, just here. Please stand and state your name for the minutes.
Ian, I'd like to kind of extend off that previous floor speech, which is monogamy is not marriage, and the assumption that monogamy must be a one-time relationship that lasts for your entire life seems inherently flawed. The opening speaker for the opposition brought up the fact that it's just an expression of love, and if the motion is going against that expression of love, why is that a better world than without having monogamy as an option for lovers to have? Marriage does not need to be exclusive to monogamy, nor does it need to be any part of monogamy. Can you please elaborate this in your next speech?
Okay, thank you to Ian. Any other speech from the floor? We'll come to board in a minute. Could you go just here? Please stand and state your name for the minutes.
Hi there, I'm Deshaun. It is almost as if the people who want to remain monogamous, they are being prosecuted under the the culture that has been made up today, because there are people who want to stay in a committed relation and have to want to have the stability, and okay, where would it end? You've had your fun experience, but where would it stop? 10 partners, 20, 100, 1,000, you've tasted basically everyone in the world. Where is it going to end? You've had your dopamine release, you've had every satisfaction that you want to, but where is the polyamory is going to end? Would a person not want to have a stable relationship at the end?
right at the back, please stand and state your name for the minutes.
That was a very slippery slope fallacy. I don't think that's quite valid. I don't think that a polyamorous relationship doesn't necessarily dictate that it's not stable. I know multiple people who have been in long-term polyamorous relationships where it's a mutual fostering together. I think that your idea of a polyamorous relationship is maybe formed on not knowing anyone who's polyamorous, and so just that wasn't it.
Okay, thank you to Bonnie. Other speeches from the floor? Yep, let's go just here in the front. Please stand and state your name for the minutes.
I'm Hugo, and I think I would like to offer a rebuttal to both sides in a hot take. Celibacy. So I would like to hear a comment from both sides about this side of the argument. So I acknowledge that polyamorous relationships and monogamy can work in various different ways, and as one of you said, that relationships can take multiple forms. The absence of relationships can only take one form. And I would like to bring up some of the advantages of celibacy. Self-discipline, mental clarity, deepening friendships, religious, philosophical or intellectual pursuits, deepening one's own family connections, some might say more financial stability, and as from and more of a religious point of view, one may say there's more time to do God's work. Thank you.
Okay, thank you to take other speeches from the floor. Yep, just here. Please stand and state your name for the minutes.
Hi, Connor, and I wanted to pose a question, I think from both sides. We've heard some great perspectives here tonight on understanding of marriage in whatever context you want as the freedom it brings, expression it brings, but one of Claire Edwards' early points was that monogamy begins as a context for how do I know that my children are mine? Now, I will not deny that creates issues, and we can discuss what it would mean to produce equitable monogamy that keeps it healthy for both parties, but I am curious about the question, if there seems to be a principle there of security for the children as well. This is my father, this is my mother, and this is who I come from, and this will continue to be my safe zone. I am curious about the question, and does polyamory present alternative models for that? And if not, does that present a problem we have to consider?
Okay, thank you. Can I have the speeches from the floor that aren't board? No? Okay, we'll go to board. We'll start with Jamie.
So the government has, I'm going to stand there. The government has talked a lot about why individuals should have the freedom, because should have the freedom to choose their partners and choose their types of relationships, because relationships indeed do come in many shapes and sizes. To this, I don't disagree. However, I'm yet to hear an argument that's mutually exclusive from the proposition that monogamy is something that should be opposed rather than something that perhaps can be simply or merely tolerated, which I believe is an argument that the opposition has brought up very well, and that many forms of relationships should be tolerated and we ought not be opposing any of those. And I would like to hear a clear and specific rebuttal to what was brought up by the opposition and make an argument that is exclusive from that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Other speeches from the floor? Yep, let's go to Kat.
Hi, I'm Kat, for the record. There's been a lot of speeches addressed to the proposition, but I would like to address one to the opposition. And I would say I hate to nitpick, but that's a lie. Susie made a point in her speech about how monogamous married parents in the house can benefit children. And I actually did a lot of research on this when I was a psychology undergrad 100 years ago. And actually, one of the things that comes up in that field of research is that that has less to do with the fact that they're monogamous parents, or that they're a man and a woman, or that there's only two parents in the house. and actually more to do with there's 2 incomes and 4 pairs, 4 hands. And actually that can look like a lot of different things and have a similar effect on the mental well-being and physical well-being of the children. And actually, in certain communities where there's issues of fatherlessness or a lot of single mothers in the community, children, if they're able to find that kind of figure in the community, even though they're not biologically related, the effects could be exactly the same. The other person doesn't actually need to be your father at all. And that's why we can see situations where a loving step-parent and a biological parent can create an environment where children can flourish exactly the same, and it's the same for adopted and fostered children as well. So.
Okay, thanks, Kat. Let's go to Bob.
Ironically, in a motion that talks about romantic exclusivity, at the table we've had really inexclusive arguments. So on proposition, gender power dynamics can exist in multiple forms of relationships. For example, in Sweden, we see when there's loads of gender egalitarianism and paternity leave and maternity leave is symmetric, you often see housework still being gendered in this perspective. But also on the opposition side, what gives the best emotional fulfillment is abstract, and it's very different for different people. So the best argument of this motion is not about the properties of either type of on the side of the house, or what can exist in a relationship, because that's speculative. What is most important is the way in which it proliferates in norms and narratives in society, because how people internalise these things in the first place. So to support the opposition, 2 points. First of all, monogamy offers quite a useful benchmark, which is proliferated through things like close friendships and things like that, about trust and the importance of it and the premium based on it, but also a useful benchmark about what fulfillment is, and it's useful for people to sort of weigh their relationship against these sort of things in the first place, and it filters, it allows us to filter these people. But also just look at the opposite of monogamy in society. There's often a lack of resources and information about it. Therapy is very inaccessible, couples counselling is inaccessible, there's massive amounts of stigmatisation in peer networks. Society at this moment in time of debating it is not very equipped to deal with non-monogamous relationships, and that has harmful effects on emotional fulfillment, relationships, which are the most important metric in the debate, as both tables on the side have agreed with this in the first place. We don't know what's going to happen in the future, and if we're going to have the capacity to be able to have these relationships in the first place. But as we have biological imperatives to have security and things like that. Often the concept of marriage over time has been about extending our agency, but this is more about your personal security, and that's very, very hard for you to dislodge when you're in non-monogamous relationships. So norms and narratives and how we feel and internalise them is the most important thing in this motion, and that's why having more choice and opposition is the way you have to vote in this motion.
Okay, thank you to Parth. Any final speeches from the floor? Yep, we'll go at the back, please. Owen?
Okay, sorry, another competitive debate speech, but I'm going to ask about the weighing in this debate. So, first issue, I want to talk a bit about, ask about monogamy's benefits itself versus its harm to other types of relationships. Gov tell us that there are, relationships are harmed insofar as it's difficult to consent well into monogamy, and it's difficult, the capitalist push of monogamy can be harmful to other relationships or say monogamy can be good, but what is the benefits to monogamy when weighed up against the harms to the other relationships claimed by Gov? Second of all, on the value of monogamy itself, on how we weigh up the Gov claims on entering into the relationship and then trust failing because of the ways that life sways you, versus being able to build the trust because of the ways life sways you. Rather than just making the claims, I'd really like to hear from you how these two arguments interact and which one is more important and should be prioritised. Finally, then, on the principle, on the idea whether or not siding with Gov makes you a bigot or not. First of all, why this is not contingent on winning the clash on whether or not consenting into monogamy is correct. And second of all, why the practical benefits or harms of monogamy all outweigh the desire not to be, a bigot in this debate. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much to Owen. We have time for one more floor speech if anyone would like to give it. Rock, paper, scissors between board, please.
Okay, this is a speech that I think is by a competitive debater that I'm going to continue my tradition of doing a non-competitive debate style speech and addressing a specific type of interpretation of this debate as brought up by the second speaker on prop, which is to say the idea of non-monogamy as the ability that the relationship does not go on forever, that is not eternal, that we can end and switch in people in and out as we grow and change. And I'd like to dispute as to why this is a good thing. Specifically, I think that one of the main problems and one of the main issues with the modern dating landscape, as opposed to how it was 100 years ago for all its improvements, is the illusion that we have so much choice, right? And the reality that we have so much choice. If we can continually swipe left on 100 different people on dating apps, if we have the idea that our relationship is not going to go on forever, if we have the idea that this person we're with is only with us for a certain limited period of time, I think we always have the notion that there is always someone else out there who could be better for us at any period of time, right? When we grow and change, we always question whether there is someone better for us out there. And I think this perpetuates the harmful idea that, for one thing, that people are only there to serve our needs and our interests rather than working in a partnership to create something greater than just ourselves. But I also think it perpetuates the capitalist stereotype of just treating people as products to be consumed, as things simply there for our own benefit and our own enjoyment, and not the fact that relationships ought to be separate from this transactional, very economic status, and actually something that are far more foundational to our lives and foundational to the things that make us strong human beings and have stable emotional states and stable senses of who we are as people.
Jack, and to everybody who contributed from the floor. There's a lot to get into that in response speeches. We will announce the winner of the Best Floor Speech Prize at the end of the debate, along with who has won. Now it's time to return to the table itself, so we'll go in reverse order, starting with opposition. Have you decided how you'd like to split your time this evening? Equally?
Okay.
Yeah, equally?
Yes,
okay, wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
The things that they asked me to look at. I don't look that way.
There's debate, another micro debate going on. Bill Shackman, everyone.
Okay, thank you for so many great questions and floor speeches. I don't think I'm going to be able to cover everything in 5 minutes. I guess, first of all, there were a number of points raised about other forms of marriage, and I'll point out, as I said earlier, group marriage, polyamory, there are many forms of marriage. I'm simply saying monogamy is one of those forms of marriage, and I will readily admit that the history of monogamy is loaded with oppression. I mean, there is plenty of misogyny there. Tara suggested creating a contract. That's in fact what my wife and I did. Was we took the traditional religious contract, which is essentially a transaction, and wrote a new contract that describes the sense of equity and equality that we wanted to aspire to. I think that we need to have the ability to define our own marriages in the way that we would like. And as I've said, exclusivity I find meaningful because of the particularity of that relationship. Marriage is indeed fun as it changes and grows over time. celibacy has numerous problems. But again, if someone wants to enter into that freely, it's not, for me or for this house to oppose that, right? But we should recognize the problems inherent in monogamy, the problems inherent in polygamy or bigamy or any, right, or in any relationship. The notion of the illusion of choice is I think crucial here. That the relationship of exclusivity, right, frees me from the kind of capitalist model because I no longer, right, can find a better partner, right, a more lucrative partner, or someone who's more attractive or better, right? Because we've established a relationship of commitment, we remain in that relationship for better or for worse, right? The harms that are inherent in in a world where we can always get the next best thing, it can promote a kind of social breakdown. And the norms and the narrative that we aspire to should reflect the highest ideals of love, intimacy, trust, and commitment. The psychologist Robert Sternberg identified intimacy, passion, trust, and commitment as the indicators of a successful, loving relationship. And his students Lemieux and Hale actually did the research to show that relational satisfaction depends on all of those elements being a part of that marriage, however that marriage is structured. Would you like the last word? Sure. And how am I doing that time?
You have 30 seconds.
30 seconds. I'll return then, I guess, to my closing argument, which is to say simply that if we oppose monogamy outright and completely, then we would be throwing out the baby with the bathwater. We need to cherish and validate every form of consensual love. And if by monogamy we simply mean fidelity to one partner, then opposing it would be tantamount to intolerance. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Bill. Are we having the rest of the 5 minutes of opposition, or are we conceding that? Resuming?
No, I think we're just conceding that.
Yeah? Okay, wonderful. In which case, I would like to invite the proposition speaker to continue the debate. Here.
You all had a lot to say, so I'm just going to go in order. It's not going to be pretty, but I'm just going to go in order in which the things came up. Okay, so it was mentioned by my colleagues on that side of the table that your identity and family are formed through marriage. Oh, I should start with the fact that we've had a lot of talk about how, you don't have to talk about marriage because you can have monogamous relationships that are not marriage. The assignment was monogamy is specifically defined in this case as marriage to one single partner. So we didn't jump to the conclusion that monogamy has to mean marriage. It was part of the resolution, as I read in the beginning of my talk. So identity and family can be formed through monogamy and marriage. It can, but it doesn't have to be. So saying that opposing monogamy and marriage is oppression is kind of like defending reverse racism. There isn't really the power dynamics at play to support that. Marriage, monogamy, one partner, it's oppressive as a concept because of its sexist, patriarchal, and capitalist origins. So it's not the same to say, oh, if you oppose marriage and monogamy, you're also opposing same-sex relationships and kinky love, or things like that, because those don't exist in the mainstream the way monogamy was. So we can be opposed to things like whiteness and patriarchy. That doesn't mean we are opposed to white people, or all white people, or all men either. There are two different concepts. So being opposed to monogamy is not the same as being opposed to every single person who has chosen to be monogamous. I think celibacy was raised and other family forms, and those are great, but the reality is that in a society where there's one mainstream family type that's put on people, other family forms are shoved to the margins. So until we oppose one oppressive, overarching power structure, those other family types will continue to exist at the margins and not really be a realistic choice or an unconstrained choice for people who might want to test them out and try them out. So not really choice, so other family types are marginalized. So I heard a lot of mention of how intimacy and trust and dependence are really great. They are great, but why do you have to get them all from your romantic partner? There's family, there's friends. It's actually quite dysfunctional to rely on just your romantic partner to give you the majority of your emotional fulfillment. And it's something at a population level, men tend to do more than women. So men tend to rely on their intimate partners a lot for emotional labor, and it's not good for women. It's unfair to women, and women have these things called friends, who they also rely on for emotional support, and they don't tax their partners in the same way. That's why, as it was raised, partnered men are healthier than single men. Partnered women are not healthier than unpartnered women, because partnered women are taking care of men and their partners, well, partnered heterosexual women are taking care of their men who cannot form other kinds of good emotional bonds and their children. So it's not good for them at a population level. This is robustly shown in public health research and something I feel very strongly about. So it's dysfunctional for men. Oh, so Simon, who said that, wow, that sounds fun. It sure does sound fun, but it is unattainable. So what I'm saying, it is unattainable to expect at a population level people to achieve something so adventurous and fun and then feel like failures if they can't. But like skydiving sounds fun. That doesn't mean the majority of people want to do it. If you rethink the institution and renegotiate it, is it still the same institution? Are you kind of just turning back the clock a bit to make it more like an economic and social contract, or have an economic and social practical foundation? And if that's the case, why does that have to be with your intimate partner? Can't it be with someone else you'd want to live with, your sibling, someone in your family, a friend, a colleague? Why does it have to be with your romantic partner? And I have been married for 15 years. I've done lots of couples counseling, and I'm a scholar of marriage and family demography. And I just have to, the idea of getting your partner to sign a contract before you're married, laying out how you're going to do it, that sounds lovely, but have you ever tried to convince your partner to pick up their socks or wash their beard trimmings down the sink, or remember to swap laundry? I mean, if you can make that happen, good for you. But at a population level, a lot of couples struggle to make that happen. I think that's something my colleagues would agree with as well. Yes, there's different kinds of marriage, but the assignment we were given was about this specific type of marriage. Stable relationships are good. Yes, they're good, but you can have other stable relationships, like with friends and family. The one about choice overload and how pure relationships aren't necessarily better, like swapping someone in and out is not necessarily better or more fulfilling. I think you're way ahead of what Giddens and Beck and Beck-Gernsheim were talking about when they were talking about pure relationships. I think Grindr and Tinder and Hinge and Bumble would blow their minds. So they were talking more about how if a marriage is no longer happy or fulfilled, or if it's abusive, you can leave a marriage and get divorced. So they were arguing in favor, not even arguing in favor, they're making a social observation about how marriage is meant to be happy, in addition to also, we make ends meet and we pay the rent and the kids are not starving, so good enough. There was an additional requirement in order to be successful. Marriage had to also be happy. So they're saying, well, it's okay now, as a society, we recognize that if you're just unhappy in a marriage, that alone is enough to leave it. You don't have to be financially insolvent or physically abusive. It's enough to just be unhappy to leave it. They weren't talking about like swiping right on like every single, I don't even know online date, I don't know which way's bad, like left or right, I don't even know, I've been married 15 years. So you're just a little bit ahead of Beck Gernsheim and Anthony Giddens. And that's all I have. So yeah, as a heterosexual woman, and not all marriages are heterosexual, but most of them are. Marriage could be different, but it's not. It's kind of a racket, frankly. So that's my concluding argument. And I think I have time. So do you?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much for that fine speech. I'd now like to invite the last speaker to conclude the debate this evening. You have approximately 3.5 minutes. Hear, hear.
Yes, so the point about the assignment, there were moments in all of this where I was thinking like, gosh, I've just been so literal about this. But actually it was the assignment. It was about monogamy in marriage. Also, I've been married, I am divorced, I work as a couples counsellor, and of course, people are not coming to counselling because it's all going hunky-dory. So of course my perspective is one of where it's all gone wrong and when people are deeply, deeply in pain a lot of the time. And so, taking this very literally, this proposition around monogamy, my point really, what I was trying to kind of reach was about the fact that anything that we just enter into blindly is bound to lead us somewhere dark and difficult. So it's about the opportunity to really look at what that means and to explore it. And I think, well done you. It sounds fantastic, the arrangement that you have, and it's working for you. And you said that really clearly. It works for you, and it is about how we can get things to work as well as possible for people with as least pain as possible. And therefore, what I was talking about and what the focus was about monogamy being imposed upon as a societal expectation, as something that you just had to do without really looking at what that meant for you and for the people in your life. That's for me is the problem, and that is why I proposed that we oppose monogamy. Thank you.
To Claire very much, and to all of our speakers for what have been some excellent speeches this evening, and also for giving us the privilege of an insight into some of your personal relationships as well. That wasn't something that we were anticipating happening in the debate, but it kind of served to prove your arguments very emotive. So thank you for that, that's a real privilege. So now it's time to call the House to order. So if you agree when you side with the proposition, i.e. you oppose monogamy, or you believe that this House should oppose monogamy, please raise your hands now. Nice and high so we can see you, thank you. What do you have? Oh, councillor. Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much. Hands down. And then if you side with the opposition, i.e. you don't oppose monogamy, please raise your hands now. Inez is more thorough than I am. Okay, hands down, and any abstentions? Perfect, okay, thank you very much. Okay, so before we announce who has won the debate this evening and the floor speech prize, we have some announcements from board. So we'll start with Chair of Ways and Means, Alex.
Yeah, hello everyone, I'm Alex, I'm in charge of the public debates. here. Thank you very much to our speaker for what has been a wonderful debate, and special thanks to Birse for putting this week together. Right, as you know, we do these every week, so next week is going to be something a little different, but still very, very exciting. The motion, this House supports pushing boots on Mars. We have some great speakers coming along, and you should definitely come.
Okay, thank you to Alex. Now let's go to Chief Whip for Competitive, Neva.
Hi, my name is Neva. I am the head of competitive debating, which, if you want to learn how to speak, much like Owen did earlier tonight, we can teach you how to do that. We meet every Wednesdays at 2 p.m. on the top floor of the Union. And special this week, coming week, we're going to be doing a gingerbread house making social. So we'd love to have you come along for that. If you're interested in that, if you can talk to me or Jack or Owen or Abby or Lawrence, or really any member of competitive subcom, including Jenny, so we can get an idea of how many numbers there are going to be for that. But yes, we're very excited.
Okay, thank you. Now we'll go to our steward of the House for social updates, Ariel.
Right, who here's got this 1794 ticket? As you can see, our ball is getting busy and is nearly going to be sold out totally at 2/3. As you can see by my wonderful assistant here, we're coming to announce that if you want your ticket, it's time to get them now. We're offering a ball for £35, one of the cheapest of the year. That includes a magician, tarot, ceilidh, custom cocktails, and a costume competition. So if that sounds like something up your alley, then I think you need to kind of hurry along to our link and sign up before they're all gone. So you know, but besides that, I'm also here to announce that we will have our weekly social. So after this, come along with us to the Union, and if you don't know where that is, it's this far in the semester. Come on, guys, do better. Then go upstairs to top the beacon, and we'll have drinks and plenty of chat about monogamy, or not monogamy, or I don't know where the chat's going to go tonight, but come along anyway. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much to all aboard. So now it's time to announce the winner of the Floor Speech Prize and indeed the debate as well. So the winner of the Floor Speech Prize this evening goes to Joe at the back. Congratulations. Please come up and collect your prize at the end. At the end, sorry. Keen bean. No, I know, Rector's voucher is very, very promising. So the motion that stood before the House this evening was this House opposes monogamy. The ayes to the right are 11, the nays to the left are 29, and the abstentions are 6. So the motion falls. Congratulations to the opposition. Joining us here this evening. We do these debates every single week on a Thursday at the same time in the same place. We actually are the only university debating society in the country that still run these weekly sessions for free. So please do come along and support us. It's been lovely to see so many of you here. If you don't follow us on Instagram, please do. It's at STA Debates, and we'll see you all very shortly at the social. Thanks very much, everybody.